Surgery is scheduled for next Friday at 7 a.m., Elena continued. The procedure will take approximately 5 to 7 hours. Dr. Yamamoto will assist. Your recovery will require 4 days in ICU, then another week in cardiac care before discharge. She turned to face him fully. Do you have any questions about the procedure itself? Why are you doing this? Marcus finally managed. After everything I did to you, why didn't you refuse the case? Elena's expression didn't change. Because I'm a surgeon, Mr. Webb, not a judge. When someone needs help, my personal feelings are irrelevant. I took an oath to do no harm and to provide care to anyone who needs it. She returned her attention to the tablet. Besides, your insurance requires you to use our facility, and I'm the only surgeon here qualified for this particular type of valve replacement. She stood, gathering her materials. A nurse will go over the pre-operative instructions. No food or drink after midnight Thursday. Be here at 5 a.m. Friday. Bring someone to drive you home after discharge. You won't be able to drive for at least 2 weeks. Marcus really looked at her, and saw someone completely transformed from the woman he'd known. Stronger, more assured, more herself than she'd ever been with him. That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. He lay in his penthouse overlooking the Seattle skyline, his current girlfriend Chelsea sleeping beside him. She was beautiful, successful in her own right, a marketing executive he'd been dating for 8 months. But he couldn't stop thinking about Elena's face in that consultation room. The composure, the professionalism, the complete absence of the emotion he'd expected. 4 years ago, Marcus had ended his marriage to Elena with brutal efficiency. She'd been a medical resident working impossible hours, and he'd grown tired of being second priority to her career. He'd told her she was selfish, that she cared more about strangers in hospital beds than her own husband. He'd told her he wanted a divorce, and when she'd begged him to wait, to try counseling, to give her a chance to find balance, he'd refused. She'd been 8 weeks pregnant at the time, something he'd only discovered after the papers were filed. The stress of the divorce had caused a miscarriage, and Marcus had felt nothing. Or maybe he'd felt relief. A baby would have complicated everything, would have tied him to someone he no longer wanted to be tied to. He'd moved on quickly. Chelsea had come along 6 months later. Life had continued. But now, lying in the dark, Marcus realized something that made his chest ache worse than any cardiac symptom. Elena had survived him. More than survived, she'd thrived. She'd become everything she'd said she would become, and she'd done it without him. Maybe because she was without him, the senior cardiac surgeon position, the research publications he'd glimpsed on her office wall, the respect in Gloria's voice when she'd spoken Elena's name, the engagement ring. Elena had won. Not through revenge, not through making him suffer, but through sheer excellence and determination. And Marcus? He'd lost something precious and only realized it now, when it was far too late and when his life literally depended on her mercy. The surgery was scheduled for dawn. Marcus arrived at 5 a.m., his hands shaking as he changed into the hospital gown. Chelsea was with him, trying to be supportive, but Marcus barely registered her presence. Elena appeared at 6:30, her surgical cap already on, her face calm and focused. She reviewed his vitals one final time, asked him standard preoperative questions, and explained what would happen once he was under anesthesia. "Dr. Cross," Marcus said, his voice hoarse. "I need to say something before." Elena held up a hand. "Mr. Webb, whatever you need to say it after the surgery. Right now, I need you calm and focused on recovery. But if something goes wrong, nothing will go wrong," Elena interrupted firmly. "I'm very good at my job. You're going to survive this surgery, and you're going to have decades of life ahead of you. That's not arrogance. That's fact based on my success rate. She nodded to the anesthesiologist. Dr. Park will put you under now. When you wake up, you'll be in recovery. Chelsea will be waiting for you. As the medication began to flow, Marcus felt consciousness slipping away. His last clear thought was of Elena's steady hands and unwavering gaze. The surgery took 6 hours. Elena worked with meticulous precision, replacing the damaged valve, repairing weakened heart muscle, ensuring every suture was perfect. Dr. Yamamoto assisted flawlessly, and the surgical team moved like a well-rehearsed orchestra. When it was over, Elena stood in the scrub room, washing her hands, and allowed herself one moment of reflection. She'd saved the life of the man who'd abandoned her at her lowest point, the man who'd dismissed their unborn child like it was nothing, and she felt nothing, no satisfaction, no anger, no lingering pain, just the quiet knowledge that she'd done her job, upheld her oath, and proved to herself, if no one else, that his cruelty hadn't diminished her capacity for compassion. 3 weeks later, Marcus sat in Elena's office for his final follow-up appointment. The surgery had been a complete success. His heart was strong, his recovery ahead of schedule. "You're doing well, Mr. Webb," Elena said, reviewing his latest test results. "Keep taking your medications, maintain the diet plan, exercise moderately. You should have a full, normal life expectancy now." "Thank you," Marcus said quietly. "For everything. For being professional when you had every right to refuse. For saving my life when I didn't deserve your help." Elena set down her tablet and looked at him directly. "You're welcome. But understand something. I didn't save your life for you. I saved it because that's who I am. Because my value as a surgeon, as a person, isn't determined by who deserves my help. It's determined by my commitment to help anyone who needs it." She stood, signaling the end of the appointment. "You have a second chance, Mr. Webb. What you do with it is your choice. But you don't owe me gratitude. You owe it to yourself to be better than you were." Marcus nodded, understanding that this was goodbye. "Your daughters," he said, gesturing to the framed ultrasound photo on her desk. "They're lucky to have you." "They are," Elena agreed without false modesty. "And they'll grow up knowing they're valued, that their ambitions matter, that they don't have to choose between career and family. That's my gift to them." As Marcus left the hospital for the last time, he understood the profound lesson. Elena Cross had won not through revenge, but through character. She'd become extraordinary while he'd remained ordinary. She'd chosen compassion over cruelty, excellence over bitterness. He'd lived for decades now, each heartbeat a reminder of the woman who'd been strong enough to save him, despite everything. That was karma. That was justice. That was the heart he'd never valued, now beating steadily in his chest, keeping him alive. The surgical lights cast harsh shadows across Marcus Webb's pale face as he lay on the gurney, his expensive watch gleaming against the sterile white sheets. Through the pre-op room's window, he could see her, the pregnant surgeon in navy scrubs who he'd mocked just hours ago in the waiting room. His chest tightened with more than just cardiac failure. Dr. Elena Cross stood reviewing his charts, her hand resting on her rounded belly, completely professional and utterly unreachable. The woman whose heart he'd shattered 4 years ago now held his failing one in her capable hands. Marcus Webb had built his reputation on dominance. At 42, he owned Webb Financial Consulting, drove a silver Porsche, and wore suits that cost more than most people's monthly rent. His third-floor office in downtown Seattle overlooked Elliott Bay, a constant reminder of how far he'd climbed from his middle-class roots. But none of that mattered now. "Mr. Webb, your aortic valve has deteriorated beyond what medications can manage," his cardiologist had said 2 weeks ago. "Without surgical intervention within the month, we're looking at complete heart failure. I'm referring you to Harborview Medical Center. They have the best cardiac team in the Pacific Northwest. The best. That's what Marcus always demanded. He'd arrived at Harborview that morning with his assistant, Brooke, 26, efficient and perpetually anxious about pleasing him. The cardiac wing smelled of antiseptic and recycled air. Marcus hated hospitals, hated the vulnerability they represented. "I've been waiting 35 minutes, he announced loudly to the nurse at the station, a middle-aged woman whose name tag read Gloria. 35 minutes for a consultation I scheduled 3 weeks ago. Is this the level of service I should expect?" Gloria's expression remained patient. "Dr. Cross will be with you shortly, Mr. Webb. She's finishing with another patient." "Dr. Cross?" Marcus checked his phone irritably. "I was told I'd get the department head, the senior surgeon. I'm paying for premium care, not some resident." Down the corridor, a figure emerged from the staff break room. She wore standard surgical scrubs, her dark blonde hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Her pregnant belly was visible, but didn't slow her confident stride. She carried a tablet and a water bottle, moving with the unhurried certainty of someone who belonged exactly where she was. Marcus's eyes landed on her, and disgust flickered across his face. He turned to Brooke, speaking loud enough for half the corridor to hear. "You see that? This is exactly what's wrong with healthcare today." Marcus gestured toward the approaching pregnant woman, his voice dripping with contempt. "Look at her waddling around. How is someone in that condition supposed to perform complex medical procedures? This is a joke." Brooke shifted uncomfortably, glancing away. "Mr. Webb, maybe we should." "I'm serious," Marcus interrupted, warming to his audience. Several patients in the waiting area were watching now. "In my company, we have standards. We don't keep employees working when they're clearly not physically capable. It's about excellence, about maintaining quality control." Gloria's hand stilled on her keyboard, her jaw tightening. "Mr. Webb, no." "I want to know," Marcus continued, his voice echoing off the walls. "Is Dr. Cross as incompetent as the rest of this operation? Because I'm paying top dollar, and I expect someone who can actually focus on my surgery, not someone who's going to be distracted or too exhausted to do the job properly." The pregnant woman had stopped walking. She stood about 15 feet away, perfectly still, her tablet held loosely in one hand. Her face was composed, unreadable. She didn't say a word. She simply watched Marcus continue his tirade, her hazel eyes steady and unflinching. "I built a $60 million consulting firm from nothing," Marcus declared, his chest puffing with self-importance. "I know what excellence looks like. And this," he gestured broadly at the hallway, including the silent woman in his sweep, "this is barely adequate. If I ran my business this way, I'd have been bankrupt years ago." A younger nurse at the station, Mia, glanced nervously between Marcus and the woman down the hall. She started to speak, but Gloria shook her head minutely. "Wait," her expression said. "Just wait." Marcus was still talking. "Where I come from, we have dress codes, professional appearance standards. We don't let employees show up looking like they're about to Mr. Webb." The voice came from behind him. Smooth, professional, with just a hint of steel beneath the courtesy. "I'm Dr. Cross." Marcus turned, confused, and found himself facing the pregnant woman in scrubs. Up close, he could see her face clearly high. Cheekbones, clear skin, intelligent eyes that seemed to catalog everything about him in an instant. There was something familiar about her, something that tugged at the edges of his memory, but he couldn't place it. "You're Dr. Cross?" Marcus's voice was thick with skepticism. "You're the senior cardiac surgeon?" "Yes." She didn't elaborate. She stood there, waiting, her expression neutral. Marcus laughed, an ugly, brittle sound that made several people in the waiting area look away in embarrassment. "This is ridiculous. I'm scheduled for a critical procedure, and they assign me to..." He stopped mid-sentence. really looked at her face for the first time. The shape of her eyes, the way she held her chin when she was determined about something, the small scar above her left eyebrow from a childhood bike accident, his brain, sluggish with cardiac medications and lack of oxygen, suddenly made the connection. The color drained from his face. Elena. The name came out as barely a whisper. Dr. Cross, she corrected, her voice still perfectly professional. Shall we proceed to the consultation room, Mr. Webb? We have a lot to discuss about your condition. Marcus's mouth opened and closed. The pregnant belly. The surgical scrubs. The title of senior cardiac surgeon. None of it made sense. The last time he'd seen Elena cross Elena Webb. Back then, she'd been crying in their apartment while he packed his bags, telling her the marriage was over. She'd been a struggling second-year resident, exhausted and emotional, barely holding herself together under the weight of 100-hour work weeks. She definitely wasn't pregnant. She definitely wasn't standing in front of him, looking like she could buy and sell him with her credentials alone. I didn't know, he stammered. I know you didn't, Elena said calmly. Elena turned to Gloria. Please have someone bring Mr. Webb's file to consultation room 5. Also, page Dr. Yamamoto. I want a second opinion on the valve replacement approach. She looked back at Marcus, and for just a moment, something flickered in her eyes. Not anger, not satisfaction, something deeper and more complex. Then it was gone, replaced by professional courtesy. This way, Mr. Webb. She walked past him, her pregnant belly leading the way, her posture straight and her head high. Marcus stood frozen, replaying every word he'd just said in the hallway, every cruel comment, every mocking gesture. He'd said all of it directly in front of the one person who had every reason to hate him, the woman whose life he'd destroyed, the woman who was now, apparently, the only surgeon skilled enough to save his failing heart. Mr. Webb? Elena had paused at the consultation room door, looking back at him with raised eyebrows. Your time is valuable, as you mentioned. Shall we begin? Marcus's legs felt like water, but he forced himself to move. Behind him, he heard whispered conversations starting up at the nurse's station. Gloria's voice carried clearly. That's karma right there. That's exactly what karma looks like. He followed Elena into the consultation room, his heart pounding irregularly in his chest, each beat reminding him why he was here. He needed this surgery. His cardiologist had been very clear. Without intervention, Marcus had maybe 6 weeks to live. His heart was failing, damaged by years of stress, genetic predisposition, and a lifestyle he'd refused to change. And the best surgeon available, possibly his only option, was the woman he'd betrayed, humiliated, and abandoned 4 years ago. As Elena set her tablet on the table and pulled up his medical files, Marcus noticed her hands. They were steady, completely steady. There was no tremor of emotion, no sign of the crying, broken woman he remembered. She wore a simple engagement ring on her left hand, a square-cut emerald surrounded by tiny diamonds. Elena pulled up an image on the large monitor. It showed Marcus's heart, the damaged valve clearly visible, stenosed and calcified. As you can see, Mr. Webb, your condition is critical, she explained in clear clinical terms. The aortic valve has severe stenosis. Without surgical intervention within the next 3 weeks, you're looking at acute heart failure. She zoomed in on the image. The valve replacement is complex. Your heart muscle has already begun to weaken from compensating for the restricted blood flow. Marcus couldn't speak. He just stared at the screen, at the image of his failing heart, while the woman he'd betrayed explained exactly how close to death he really was.